Great. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for making some time for this really important community briefing. First of all, I want to welcome my colleagues, Debbie Kardon with the Action for Post-Soviet Jewry, Vladimir Foygelman with Center Makor, which is a Jewish Education and Cultural Center, and then the director of the Shapiro Foundation, Larry Tobin. We only have 1 hour, so it's a tight schedule. We're going to really stay on time. Every one of the presenters will present their area and then ask quick Q&A, because we don't want to leave to the very end if you have a question particular to the presenter briefer. Couple of housekeeping admin. Everybody's on mute, because in case, particularly if somebody calls via a cell phone, we can, you know how that can be very disruptive. The best way to ask questions will be through the chat. Everybody was very generous with when they first signed up for this. We had a way for people to ask questions, so we already know there's 5 basic areas people want to know about, and we're going to cover those. At the end, we want to make sure that your questions are answered, and particularly the number 1 question is, when are Ukrainian refugees coming to the greater Boston area, and how you could be helpful. This is really why we set this up. 2 weeks ago, we were getting a lot of calls, and we still didn't have a lot of information. The president had not yet authorized any refugees to come to the U.S. Now, as you know, 100,000 have been authorized. And at the end, I will be the last presenter, really, as the resettlement agency, really talk about what we're seeing, particularly information we've received from HIAS. But we have a really treat today, particularly with Larry Tobin, director of the Shapiro Foundation. He just returned from Moldova. He was there with his boss, Ed Shapiro, really, having an eye on what was happening there on the ground. I won't steal Larry's thunder, but Shapiro Foundation, it does global work on refugee causes. So obviously this is a major global situation. So they were there on the ground. So without further ado, I want to introduce Larry Tobin, and Larry, take it away. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Lino. Thanks to everybody for making this a priority and making the time, glancing through the Zoom room. It's wonderful how many familiar faces there are, and specifically how many folks on here who have been directly involved with JFS in welcoming in newcomers and welcoming in refugees, which is for sure one of the pieces that we'll talk about. I'm going to skip over the first piece. Debbie and Vladimir have a lot more insight into the horrific reality for so many folks in kind of Eastern and Central Ukraine and what's going on. And both have been part of, Debbie in particular has been part of just like extraordinary efforts to get stuff in that is life-saving. Our expertise is on refugee resettlement. With this particular concept of community sponsorship or co-sponsorship, which so many of us have been blessed to be a part of through JFS. JFS and Metrowest, without any exaggeration, is the best resettlement agency in America. We probably fund somewhere between 50 and 60 individually, and the quality under Lucia's leadership is just, it's extraordinary. It's unlike anything else. And it's a really challenging balance, because quality by definition comes at the expense of quantity. And for every family that we're not taking because we're doing such a deep, intensive job, somebody else is helping in a way that's not as good as we are, frankly. So many of us have been involved first with welcoming Syrians, now welcoming in Afghans, and now a lot of us are thinking about, is there an opportunity to welcome in Ukrainians? And I think the answer continues to be, we don't know. I think the real punchline is that most of our efforts are going to be better placed elsewhere, which is going to be an unpopular thing that probably a lot of us don't want to think about, but it is the reality. When we were in Moldova and Romania last week, there were a couple very visceral things that jump out. The first is you read in the headlines, men under 60 are being held back. But to actually see like dozens and dozens of people very calmly and very humanely and methodically kind of getting off of minibuses that have just come from the border. They drive about 2 kilometers. We were in Moldova, which is about an hour's drive from Odessa. About close to a week into kind of starting to feel the pressure. And you see a lot of moms with their kids. And you see a lot of moms with their kids and their elderly parents, and didn't see a single man that looked under the age of 75. And it's shocking and it's striking. The humanity with which these humans are treated is really beautiful, and is the literal antithesis of the images that we saw in the Kabul airport, and the literal antithesis of the experience that that so many folks that we know who have left Syria through Turkey, through the Greek islands, or fled from sub-Saharan Africa or what have you. It's out of just utter chaos and terror and horror does come some beauties in from humankind, and hopefully this is how we begin to treat all displaced folk. We met a lot of Jewish Ukrainians, and we met a lot of non-Jewish Ukrainians. There were, I would say, a minority of the Jewish Ukrainians are thinking about making Aliyah right now. I think most of the Jewish Ukrainians that we met are very similar to the Gentile Ukrainians we met, in that they're all thinking about staying as close to Ukraine as possible, where they can be safe, thinking about where ideally they can be in a Russian-speaking environment. Moldova has that advantage over, say, Poland, Slovakia, and thinking about being as damn close as humanly possible to their dad, their son, their grandson, their whomever, who is either holding down the fort or fighting or just hiding for his life in the basement. We've never seen something like this. When the Taliban took over Kabul, everybody wanted to get the heck out immediately and not plan on returning anytime soon. This is so different, and it's so complex. Zelensky's been really explicit with the West about a lot of things, most of which our leadership continues to ignore. But one in particular about, do not put in a pull factor to pull my people away, please. Both immediately now, so that there's not a hollowed out, and so Putin can't just say, hey, nobody's here and we're taking over. And two, for sure, for his incredibly hopeful and hopefully truthful rebuilding of the country, which God willing happens really soon. And so when we think about the displacement of these human beings and where they will or where they can end up, we are thinking about the full announcement that will come from the US government. The last I heard was that allegedly it was coming out tomorrow, but I continue to believe that they'll keep kicking that can down the road. US government did say that 100,000 folks will come. I believe that 99.9% of those folks will be reuniting with a first-degree relative. I think the last 0.1% will be, folks that have been super injured in the war and could come here for treatment at MGH or something like that, or for some really extenuating circumstances. LGBTQI activists, or really folks that could be particularly vulnerable. But almost everybody we're going to see is going to be coming for a first-degree relative. There's certainly going to be more demand than the 100,000 spaces for those individuals. The biggest question, the reason the US government continues to hedge and take a little bit of time, is because refugee processing takes years. As those of you who have engaged directly with the Afghans that we've welcomed in know, they did not come here as refugees. They came here with essentially a made-up status called humanitarian parolees, which is a temporary status. They're paroled in by the Department of Homeland Security for 2 years, for 24 months, and from there they need to get a full legal status. What we're seeing with the Ukrainians and their status across Europe and across the UK and across Canada is it's all temporary. Again, part of that is this incredibly hopeful and hopefully realistic view that they will only have to be there for a number of months or years and be able to return. And part of it is also just political posturing, so they don't have to give them a certain level of benefits and give them full status and what have you. There's one pathway historically into the US called the Lautenberg Amendment, which is a small particular slice of refugee resettlement, specifically for religious minorities from the former Soviet Union. But because the pathway has been closed for a couple of years from the US government, and so Congress and the executive branch will reopen it unequivocally. They'll expedite it unequivocally, but that's a matter of many months in a best case scenario. And these are folks who need to get out of harm's way immediately. There's a second. yeah, go ahead. You know.
Yeah, so Larry, some of the questions that we received is, because you were on the ground, is particularly how can the community support the operations there now, right? There's a bunch of organizations, putting up families in hotels, giving them train tickets to if they have a family member somewhere in Europe. How can our community here help in that effort?
I will, sure. So I'll share with you the in terms of the emergency crisis piece, and again, and I deeply defer to Debbie on that. The two organizational partners that we hold most closely in the region right now. One is called IsraAid. It's an Israeli nonprofit that does disaster relief work. We have partnered with them in 3 different contexts previously. Because it's Israel, 20% of their headquarters staff are Russian speakers. It's a huge competitive advantage in this particular work. And I will say, like, I'm sure, like many of you, so many folks have want to go there and help and what have you. And literally, if you don't speak Russian, don't go to the region is basically the punchline there, right? And so IsraAid is able to go, and it's just extraordinary. They're in Moldova and Romania. The second organization, which is our largest kind of international non-sectarian work, it's called Choose Love. Their website is choose.love. We have funded them very generously for years, and they actually just were in the news because Bezos, her name will come back to me in a moment, just gave them, I think, $3 million for this work, and you can be sure they went through the ringer for it. Those are our 2 most trusted partners. On the resettlement front, what we're trying to solve for, and I'll be in London on Monday and Tuesday trying to piece this together, is make sure that the Jewish communities across Europe have what they need to welcome in, hopefully on a temporary basis, refugees, both Jewish and not Jewish. There's not the resettlement infrastructure that we have here, but HIAS, who's JFS's kind of national resettlement partner, is the expert in this. There's a conference happening live right now, they're asleep right now, but today and tomorrow, between HIAS, between the JDC, the Joint, who if you want to kind of serve Jews in there, is extraordinary what they do, and they have a huge infrastructure across Europe. And there are 2 kind of regional Jewish organizations. One's EJC and one's ECJC. There's not the same network of JFSs across Europe, even major affluent metropolitan areas. So we need to staff up social workers and caseworkers there. There are probably financial resources for the actual kind of opening of homes and immediate cash assistance, but it's irresponsible for somebody to bring in a newcomer or to help a newcomer if they're not prepared to do so for at least 6 months. And so we need to also supplement the dollars there. So I will follow up with Lino, who can follow up with the group kind of hopefully towards the end of next week, as we kind of figure out how we can actually make sure that the European countries, and the UK in particular, are actually doing good on their headlines of how many folks they're willing to let in.
Thank you, Larry. And if you have a question for Larry, put it in the chat, because we're going to go, just to stay on time, we're going to go to Debbie for her brief on what she's been doing, particularly in the community, a little bit of history about her organization and what they have been doing to really locally send aid to the front in Ukraine. So thanks, Larry, and Debbie, over to you.
Thank you, Lino. Thank you, Larry. So, Action started in '75 as a refugee organization and worked in that world for many years. And when the Soviet Union fell in 1991, we went over to see what we could do. And at that time, there was a lot of work that needed to happen to rebuild Jewish life. And our organization was committed to staying involved and rebuilding Jewish life. We're now actually the only organization from that era of grassroots Soviet Jewry movement that is still operational and it's still actually doing work. And over the years, our work has really stayed steadfast, and we've worked in about 12 communities in Ukraine. And we really have worked with a whole volunteer network of coordinators to reach mostly elderly, mostly very vulnerable, very at risk people in all of the communities. What Larry kind of talked about a lot was like the larger, more broad international relief organizations, and they provide this amazing umbrella of resources and work and networks across the world, and they're really amazing. And all of the organizations that Larry talked about, including the organization that he works for, do unbelievably miraculous work. And we're kind of like this small little person-to-person relational organization. And so here we are, we serve about 200 to 300 elderly in these 12 communities, and this war breaks out. And we had to quickly pivot and figure out what are we going to do to support people. And at the same time, I had my phone was blowing off the hook here with people, you know, like I'm sure Larry gets calls and Lino gets calls and Vladimir gets calls, people who want to do something, that it's so hard to just watch and want to do something. And so we really started to do things on two levels. One is we wanted to make sure that we could get supplies and support directly to people who needed it. So we knew that there was like this big umbrella of aid going over, but we were also very concerned about the individual Bubby and Zadies that we worked with in each of the communities. 3 of our communities are actually in the south: Mariupol, Melitopol, and Berdansk, which are the communities you hear a lot about in the news if you're following the war very closely. And so we've been very, very concerned about them. And so we've been actually like sending money individually to people. We've been packing and shipping things over. We're part of, Boston has had a long history with a city in Ukraine, Dnipro, and we sent over satellite phones to all of the community leaders in Dnipro to make sure that if the worst happens and if they lost power and internet and cell phone service, we would still have a way of communicating with them. We're connected to a whole network of nonprofits on the ground in Ukraine, and they'll call and say, we are in desperate need of high-level, EMT-level professional medical kits. Can you put 50 together and send them over? And I'll call a volunteer and say, we need to get this going, and she'll call her friends and they'll have this whole, you know, thing happen, and miraculously they'll get these 50 kits going, and whatever they can't get donated, Action will use the money that we get gets donated to us to sort of fill in the gaps, and then we send these kits over. And you know, we have this whole network of people there and this whole network of people here who are working together to make all this happen. We just piloted these 2 programs here to support there. One is we're working with Russian-speaking volunteers here to make check-in phone calls to our elderly there. Most of our elderly are sheltering in place. Like Larry said, you know, they don't want to leave. The trip to the border is 2 or 3 days. They can't even fathom. Some of them have never left their village. They can't even fathom this idea of leaving, and they would rather shelter in place to the best of their ability. Most of those coordinators that I mentioned, the volunteer coordinators that we have in each of our communities, they have not left. Exactly what Larry said. People who have left because they have young children, or they're able to get over to the border, but they don't want to go far because they have a husband, a son, a brother, some relative that's a parent even that's staying and does not want to leave. So we're actually doing more of the work in Ukraine. And I'm often asked, like, is there anybody left in Ukraine? Like, we're seeing all of these people leaving, thousands and thousands of people, refugees have left Ukraine. And what I say is, there's over 40 million people who live in Ukraine. The latest statistics that I saw the other day is that there's about over 3 million that have left, and 7 or so million that are displaced within the country itself. So some people from the south who have gone more to the west. But there's a lot of work to do within the confines of Ukraine itself. So the check-in calls is one thing that we're doing. The other thing that we're doing is we're working with schools, both secular, regular public schools and temple schools, to provide some education to students about what's happening in Ukraine, the history there, and also give them the opportunity to put together soup bag kits and activity kits for children and elderly. And as shipping opens up, some of those start to send those things over as well. So the idea is to really galvanize, as a small grassroots organization, the tenets of who we are as the ability to galvanize volunteers, to activate networks of people here, to support networks of volunteers there, is kind of what we're doing right now.
Great, thank you, Debbie. I put in the chat Debbie's organization, and I know Debbie was because there's been such a huge response. Debbie was looking for a location because all people will order a bunch of Amazon packages, and basically things just don't fit in her garage anymore. Debbie, could you talk about what you need locally for the response that people here could, maybe with their connections or themselves, help you out?
So Vlad and Center Makor actually came through with some space in Newton, and another organization is available to us to actually take the packages. We have an Amazon wish list that I update regularly, and the Amazon wish list can be found on our website. And again, that list is updated because I get a call from somebody who says we need this or we need that. We're starting a campaign next week with a woman in the North Shore. She's actually adult incontinence protection is out. They're out in Ukraine. There's almost nothing left. And you can imagine an elderly person who is by themselves, has to be in a shelter for a few days. People were returning from the war who's injured. These are things that are not just needed for health. They're also about human dignity and respect. And so she's taking up a huge collection on like bladder control, depends, those things that go over mattresses and that kind of stuff. So all of that's on our wish list, and we gather them, volunteers gather them, and we pack them up and we send them over. So we need the stuff, we need the donations, we need at times we need volunteers to come and help pack and sort. I think those are
great. So Zach just posted the Amazon wish list. I put in the chat the website. If this is something that you want to do with your family or your organization, please go on the website, reach out to Debbie, because again, on the ground, we have a bunch of different organizations helping out. If you want to send cash, there's at the end I'll have a link with all the different organizations, whatever may appeal to you. Cash is obviously the best way, but we all know we want to do something locally, and Debbie, that's what their group is doing, something locally. So thank you, Debbie. Next briefer is Vladimir Foygelman. Vladimir is actually from Kyiv, Ukraine. He's Ukrainian, and this particularly for for him is very personal. You know, we here at JFS for a very long time, we're part of the Russian cultural, you know, and when I say Russian, you know, the former Soviet Union, which included many, you know, countries, including Ukraine, that we had a cultural center here, and now Center Makor has really taken that as a core mission. So it's really great to have you here, Vlad. And I'm going to turn it over to you for you to really talk about what you're thinking about with your community, your organizations, really with kind of centered on how do we get ready to receive? Because I think many times, and we know this here at JFS, you know, the U.S. government likes to treat us as a faucet. They'll say, oh, there's, you know, 30,000 people coming in the next month, you know, turn the faucet on. And unless we're prepared, we do a disservice to families. So Vladimir, great to have you here. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lina. Hi, everyone. At Center Makor, we really doing a lot right now. And Center Makor took like very active position, let's say, in this situation, because not only for me, for many of us, it's personal. We still have close relatives, like parents, some of us has parents there, brothers, sisters, friends, lots of people whom you know in person. It's the same for us, like in Israel when it was an intifada or it was jihad there. It was also personal for us because we have families and relatives and friends, close friends in Israel as well. I never thought what like relation with Ukraine will come to me so close after I left Ukraine almost 25 years ago. But all of this all of a sudden brought back real feelings, real thoughts about who am I, and I realized that, but yes, I am Ukrainian. I'm Ukrainian Jew. Despite all previous things what happened between me and my life in Ukraine. But for many of us, we understand right now what the difference between what happened then in 90s when we left Ukraine. We left anti-Semitic society in most cases. But right now, we're seeing different people, different population, different nation with whom we have a relation, and they absolutely not those people who in 90s tried to be right-wing, very hard nationalists against Jews or other nations there. And since war started, for many of us as well, it's like go back practically 80 years ago. When I watch it in my eyes, like rockets and bombing of Kiev, it was like I'm watching in my own eyes life story, which was told to me by my grandparents. Then Germans bombed Kiev on June 22nd, 1941. It was absolutely the same feeling. It was horror in my head. My wife was like depressed for almost 2 weeks. We couldn't understand how it could happen, especially between the Russian and Ukrainian people. We couldn't understand how it could happen, but it happens. And of course, we're glad what majority of former Soviet Union community or Jews here or people who came, non-Jews as well, stood on the side of Ukraine. Yes, we have trolls. Yes, we have zombie people even here in Boston. I mean, greater Boston. And we know them. It's mostly elderly people from Russia, from Moscow. They really still believe what Putin is doing everything right. unfortunately. But young population, young people or middle-aged people, they all on the side of Ukraine. We have huge activity among our community to help Ukraine. We have already organized several different groups which concentrating on special needs of bank, or only medical supplies, only humanitarian help. Things for military like visors, bulletproof vests, helmets. We, for example, collecting warm military clothes for territorial defense, and glad to say what our first packages arrived in Ukraine, and they will be, I hope, in a day or two distributed among territorial defense. They really needed, they called on nights. It's really cold there on nights like here right now, and they need our help. We're sending food like special snack bars, protein bars, with fighters will stay not hungry at the battle or on the battlefield or at their patrols. We sending channeling money through our center to buy special evacuation cars, ambulance cars, other stuff, lots of things what we're doing. And one of you can all see it at centermakor.org, and you can donate to specific cause, or you can buy those wish list and send it to us, and we will send it to Ukraine. We're very closely working with shipping company, Ukrainian shipping company. They're helping us a lot. We're working with consulate, Ukrainian consulate in Ukraine. We are very close with Ukrainian community here. Actually, on April 10th, we will do first time Jewish community and Ukrainian community will come together to do one event, Day of Unity. Please, also you can see it at Center Makor, or you can see it at Center Makor on Facebook very easily. We're all asking you to come and support. Will be great event. But what touching to families, yes, once on Facebook where was group was starting to discussing what to do if kids will arrive and refugees will start to arrive. And we decided, well, people started asking me because sent messages to me directly. At first, I have no idea what to do. Then we decided, let's, people want to be hosts, let's collect their information. When I touched it to Lino, I went to CGP, asked it to JFC, and then they all directed me to Lino. And we right now have a good amount of families, Russian and Ukrainian speaking families. We specific, we don't ask other families because especially for kids, it will be, we want the less stress as possible. When we will come here, we want to be in an environment what is familiar for them. If it will happen, we don't know even if it will happen like we plan it to, but we still collect people. We actually more about it. I want to pass 2 minutes to my associates who really devoted right now only to talking to families, to speak to families, to collect their information. Lena, please, can you update us a little bit?
Vlad, what's the name, Vlad? So Zach can unmute.
Yeah.
Lena.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Elena Leinik.
Hi.
I'm working at Center Makor. Right now we have, I think, some kind of 60 families who are ready to host kids and their moms from Ukraine. As Vladimir said already, almost all of them are Russian-speaking, Ukrainian-speaking, and Belarusian-speaking families, but some American families wanted to help us too. So it's not a small database we have already.
And also we already helped one family, as I know. Yeah, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. One of the things I've been working with Vladimir is housing. As we've learned, particularly currently with the Afghan evacuee project, there's no affordable housing, right? So being able to, it's all retail, being able to reach out to our connections, families will say, oh, well, I have an in-law apartment you can use for 6 months. Sometimes it's all it takes, transitional housing for us to be able to use, because normally what happens is the families start coming very quick. And I think that's what's going to happen with the Ukrainian project is that exactly. So before I get into
Lino, can I point only one thing?
Yes, please.
Those families, you need to understand psychology of these new Ukrainians. They are not seeking for possibility to stay in the United States. They're really waiting until peace will be coming back when Ukraine win the war, and we're planning to go back as soon as possible. That's the difference between all of refugees what were coming to United States before. They don't want to be citizens of United States.
That's a very good point. But depending on how long it takes to reconstruction of some of the cities in Ukraine, 6 months can turn to 2 years, as we know from the Haitian community came here during disaster, and could turn into 20 years.
Could be.
Yeah. So thank you, Vlad, and thank you, Elena, for your comments. Appreciate it. So it's my turn. And for us as JFS, as Larry alluded to, I'm going to keep my comments short so we can actually, if somebody wants to actually ask a question live, we can do that. JFS is a resettlement agency. It's in our DNA. We've been doing this work since 1979 when we were founded. What really made our organization grow was resettling former Soviet Union Jewry. And when that was done, then Vlad was his family was one of those. Then, it didn't matter, which, what cohort group throughout the world was suffering and wanted to come to America as a refugee. Our whole point was, we don't do it because the people we're resettling are Jewish. We do it because we are Jewish. It is our imperative, given our, really our biblical history. So this has been work that has centered us through the very founding of our organization. So now we're here. As I mentioned, we've resettled refugees from the Congo. We resettle refugees from wherever there is, terror and war, basically. And 5 years ago, we were involved with a humanitarian project with Syrians. We're now involved with, Afghan evacuees, and now we're preparing, right? The most important thing for us as a resettlement agency is to prepare. We do not like to be surprised. We do not like to provide service to our clients that is not the best, but good enough for government work. That's not us, right? We want to provide quality work. So we're doing a lot of thinking about if we get refugees from Ukraine, whether temporary, some more permanent, what would that look like? So right now we're really planning on two distinct groups, more than likely. Larry alluded to this, a Lautenberg Amendment of refugees, which is Lautenberg is for basically religious persecution. That's the main thing. And certain from Ukraine is mostly, those of the Jewish community, but it could be others. But those, what the president has done with allowing 100,000, refugees, or it could be visa holders, temporary visa holders, it's 100,000, the number's 100,000, is that the State Department will accelerate the process, right? As was talked about tonight, that the refugee process is a long process, it's years. So can we actually take somebody who's in the process of, who had actually put in a refugee application for their families, particularly we had in the past dealt with a lot of families from the Eastern Ukraine, because they saw the writing on the wall. One of the families that we settled about before COVID has said, we're kind of like the families that, in Germany, and in the late 20s could see the writing on the wall. And even though we were prosperous, we decided to leave. And so we've been resettling Ukrainian Jewish families for the last decade, little by little. Most people don't know. And people are surprised when we say, yeah, we resettle Jewish refugees. They're like, what? That was back World War II. That's the case, right? Some families decide this is a situation where we need to leave here. And it's not easy to really get to the US from other countries. Unless you're a scientist or you're somebody, an academic, it is not easy to get to the United States. And depending on the government and that's legislating, it can be even harder. So there's two distinct groups, Lautenberg, which are actual refugees that we expect will take months. We will not see those families, which will probably be the single mother with kids, right? Because the adult male is a warfighter in country for months. What we are likely to see, though, and within weeks, are people who had visa applications in the process. It could be a visitor's visa. They were just going to come visit family in Boston. It could be other, academic, scientific. Those temporary visas are more likely to be authorized much quicker because basically they're already in process. It's easy to get them through. One of the important things to note is the refugee program is not a U.S. program. It is a UN program. It is administered through the UN High Commission on Refugees, and it's a tricky dance, trying to jump the line, trying to take war refugees. Imagine particularly during COVID, there's been thousands of refugees waiting in line, right? So jumping the line is, the UN Commission on Refugees is it's all about due process. So it gets really tricky for the U.S. to, allow people to jump the line. So, but temporary visas, the State Department can accelerate those, and those where I think we're likely to be like they come here and. I know, by the way, most of these folks are probably, one of the criteria is going to have that they have a family tie. They know somebody in the U.S. But normally, we know that just because you have a family tie doesn't mean the family can help you out. They may be tapped out with their own family. They come here, they're trying to help you out, but they can't help you out with housing. And I think that's where the community response is going to be. The immediate response is, within the next 3 to 5 weeks, is temporary visa holders that come here to the U.S. and then they can, if they wish, once they get here, transition to what's called TPS, right? A temporary protective status. What's good about TPS is you could actually work, right? So if you're here, the Haitian community here 20 years ago, when the initial disasters came here on TPS, and there was more disasters, more hurricanes, more earthquakes, and they stayed here for 20 years. It is not a pathway for citizenship in our country. It is exactly a temporary protective status. So that's something that if families come here with some sort of visa, they can apply for TPS based on being Ukrainian and the Ukrainian conflict, and very easily get authorized so they can work, right? But the fact is, here in Greater Boston, it's a high cost of living. The highest cost is housing. And so one of the things that I will post tonight is, because we have a lot of requests for how can I help, Lino? Can I volunteer? Can I have an in-law apartment that I can offer? The link that I will post will be that here's all the information, right? If you want to volunteer, here's a way. There's no guarantee that we have 1,000 volunteers that want to help that will pick you. Normally, what we do is we have a community sponsorship model. We work with whether it's a faith organization or other organizations that sponsor the family, right? That's currently our success model where a faith organization really, you know, they're basically sponsoring this family. They raise the funds, and we train that core volunteer group within that faith organization. It's really, we used it with the Syrian project. It's been fantastic. We use it with the Afghan evacuee project. It continues to really be a success model. But there's many other things that we can do, right? If you sign up and we can use you, we have a lot of partners in this effort that may. So we had some questions. I'll go real quick about over some questions we had when people signed up. There was, you know, as we know, there's orphans, right? There's orphans that, based on the war. Right now, the orphans are being evacuated to different orphanages in Europe. The whole orphan transfer from country to country is very regulated, also by the UN. The only ones that are going to be able to execute on that are the international adoption agencies. Those are the ones that basically are certified by these international compact to be able to do that work. JFS is not an adoption agency anymore with international accreditation, but those will be things that will be a slower process with you know, orphan children, because it's very regulated by the UN, and that's to provide, you know, to prevent black marketing of children throughout the world. It's very controlled. So that was a question that came up. Another question is was how are we going to determine if families are coming here? How do we determine assignment of families, right? We have a family. How do we assign a family to a sponsor or organization like you know, Center Makor to be able to help? And it's all retail. We, you know, the way it works out, we, as Larry mentioned, we our governing authority is HIAS, formerly the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. They you know, they get the requisition from the State Department saying, if it's a refugee family, here's somebody coming to the Boston area. Who do you have? By the way, we're the only now Jewish organization in Greater Boston doing resettlement. So normally they'll ask us, you know, can you take this family? And you know, if everything is set up right, we say, Hanani, of course, you know, here we are. We will take this family. But that's the process. So we look at our partners, and we reach out. We would reach out to Senator Makor, reach out to, you know, some of the synagogues, some of you who will tonight actually post on our website saying, yes, I can actually, I have an apartment. You could use it for 6 months to transition families. The other thing is with temporary visas, which are right now, when I think about what am I most concerned about is those temporary visas, because they will come quickly, and then how do we help them, right? The way the process works, they fly into Logan, you know, they have this temporary visa, the family, you know, may, you know, say, you know, welcome, and then the situation is, where are they going to live? Because they can't live with, you know, a family or friends in the area. So that's, I think, where, and I saw Zach just posted, you know, how you can volunteer, housing. We also have a furniture, because particularly with refugees that want to come here and stay here, the very first move is to find housing and to furnish their new home. So, all right. Those were the main questions that we had. That was the grouping of questions. Again, the timing for refugees that want to stay here is going to be months. The timing for temporary visas it could be 2 to 3 weeks, because those are, the State Department can just accelerate those, say approved, you know. And then the other thing is, how do they get here? How do they fly here, right? Because one thing is to have an approved visa. Now is you're in Poland, Krakow. How do you get to you know, JFK? And there's a lot of organizations in country. I know there's, you know, Miles for Migrants that can be inaccessible, and particularly a JDC. If if the family is Jewish or identifies as Jewish, can access that. So, all right. So now we're going to, if somebody has a specific question, because we have 6 minutes, you can raise your hand in the reactions piece of Zoom, and Zach can actually open up your mic, and then we can address your question. All right, Susan Seidel has a question. Zach, can you unmute her?
Hi, thank you all so much for your presentation. It's just so alarming what is happening, and you all are just doing such very special and important work. So for those of us who've helped through temples or other organizations, you've requested that we raise a certain amount of money to accommodate that. What advice do you say now?
Yeah. Yes, Susan, it's talking about the community sponsorship model. We have for organizations that want to sponsor a family, particularly a refugee family that wants to stay, right? They want to stay in the U.S. and make the U.S. their country. That in our area, raising $20,000 to $30,000 allows us to be able to subsidize their rent. The major issue right now we're having is affordable housing. It is not available. So, that gives us, the JFS, and our amazing case managers and amazing volunteers like you, Susan, the time to, assess the family, build their English skills, build their vocational skills, so then they can either stay where they are and market rate apartments, or we can move them somewhere where perhaps more affordable. But that's been a really good success model. And when it really started back with the Syrian project, that $20,000 to $30,000 does work. And our goal is within 1 year is to make sure that the family is stable.
So you're saying pretty much the same thing.
Yes.
So I'll jump in. I'll piggyback off of Lino. So again, I'll reiterate kind of what I said earlier. We're still making this up as we go because the U.S. government hasn't actually announced anything. But we're going to have to assume that the individuals who are coming on a temporary status. Let's call it humanitarian parole, like the Afghans for now. And we have to then further assume, some of you might recall that when the Afghans first began arriving, they didn't yet have access to like the suite of public benefits, SNAP benefits for their kids to be able to eat, access to public health insurance, things like that. I have to believe that there will be bipartisan support to replicate something like that for Ukrainians, and we have to assume and plan for that not happening. What Vladimir and Senator Makor have done by assembling a list of 60 Russian Ukrainian speaking community members who are going to welcome folks into their home is huge, because that gives everybody a lily pad to jump off on. I think realistically, we can't assume that non-family members will stay for longer than, say, 60, 90 days at the tops. That buys us some flexibility. That means that that family largely can probably support them, and we really just need to subsidize a few $100s a month for food and cell phones and the like. But Lino's math almost certainly makes sense when we're talking about a single mom-headed household. She might have language skills, she might have job skills, and she's still going to have a couple kids in a foreign country with foreign language that she's trying to get involved in school and what have you. It's completely unrealistic to assume that she's working for at least the first 6 months. And it's not a given to me that she's working by the end of the year, if we're being honest, right? So we have the most generous landlords are renting us 2 bedrooms for $1,900 right now, and they're thrilled to extend that to any Ukrainian families that we bring in. And so we can kind of work backward from there, right? If the run rate is, let's say, a minimum of $2,500 a month for that family, and they're not eligible for any kind of public benefits, and they don't have a family member that can really support them, that's $20,000 at minimum, right, over the course of that first year. That's just how I would unpack the math from Lino. But again, the second that the government kind of announces something, the highest affiliates will disproportionately be welcoming individuals in because of the historical connection to the region, not just for Jews, but for the broader Ukrainian community. And we'll have as much information as possible. Lino will follow up with all of us on it.
And
Thank you.
thank you, Susanna. I definitely want to acknowledge Rachel Lewis from JCRC. She's been doing a lot of work with us with the Afghan evacuee project. JCRC has been a huge partner with us and has been working with the Commonwealth, the governor, you know, to make sure that the state, because when refugees come into our Commonwealth, it's their workforce, right? They can be, if they're trained correctly and quickly, they become part of our workforce. So I want to thank Rachel. I don't know if she's still on. I saw her earlier. I just wanted to acknowledge the great work that the JCRC is doing for refugees and asylees. Other questions? You know, you can raise your hand through. Hey, Rachel, how are you? Oh, you're still muted.
Hi, everybody. Always good to be with you and do this work together.
Great, thank you. And we'll be busy. I'm sure we
We
are.
will. We certainly will.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see you tonight. Thanks for joining.
Actually, one question. I think I've heard what in Warsaw speech of Biden, he promised, he told something about medical benefits for refugees, some kind.
Yeah.
So in
Maybe
Massachusetts-
Commonwealth can provide some benefits for them, but we can.
Yeah.
It will be disastrous to leave people without any
Yeah.
benefits.
So in a worst case scenario, assuming he's just talking and not doing anything, which I don't believe in this case, if they come to Massachusetts, they will be eligible for Mass Health Limited and something called the Connector Care. That combination makes it almost as robust as full Mass Health. Assuming that public health care is passed, and again, the issue is he does need congressional approval for that. He can't do that through just through the executive branch. Then these individuals will be full Mass Health eligible, which is a strong program.
Yeah.
There are, in some of the red states, right, where the public healthcare isn't as robust, we had huge fears about the challenge that you're raising now when the Afghans started coming. But again, Congress kind of rapidly fixed that. And I really can't imagine that Congress doesn't rapidly kind of approve and try to kind of honestly one up the president for them to kind of be heroes on this. May we be so lucky that the Ukrainians are pawns for the good in this one little arena.
Right.
Yeah, and one more thing, one point also, it's a good thing because you need to understand Ukrainians not really like to stay on the side. We're really looking for job, for temporary jobs like waiters, stores, supermarkets, anything. If we can approach those big companies or small companies who need like hotels, whatever, if we will hire them, we will be gladly work.
Thank you, Lion. Thank you, Larry. So I just posted those two links. The most important thing, if you want to volunteer, you can put in there what capacity you want to volunteer with what organization. If, as Vlad said tonight, if you have connection with companies that can hire, right? We want to prepare. I mean, I want to have like a whole long list of people who will hire, refugees, will hire temporary protective status, because I really believe that it's not going to be 3 to 6 months. It's going to be 2 years or more. Based on the level of destruction, there will be no home to go back. So it's our responsibility to make sure that the families are here, that we protect them, and if they're able to work, we're able to do so. If not, then we support them, right? So please go on to those links and put in specifics on what you can do. If your organization wants to sponsor a family, right, and you want to raise some funds, that is fantastic. that was the reason for this community briefing tonight. It's to really just give you an idea of what's going on. We have all your emails because you registered. We will keep you updated on what's going on. But I want to thank you for caring, because it is the destruction in Ukraine is just unfathomable. It's I think in many minds it's criminal. But for us in the work in the social space, we want to care about the families and in particular the children. So I really want to thank you for coming on tonight. There was a question in the chat whether, you know, the 100,000, does that include temporary visas, refugees? The short answer is we don't know. You know, the president makes a, you know, comment, we'll accept 100,000 people. How the State Department translates that, you know, it's you know, and an executive order is signed is really what really drives that. So I think we have participants from the Jewish community, we have participants from the broader community. I think together we really can help these families. We've seen it with in the past decade that I've been doing this work, that involving the community, involving you, involving your families, really makes a difference. So I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. And again, the most important thing is we'll keep you updated. You have the links. Please let us know how you can help, and have a good night. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.